So yeah, I mean, I was saying to you on the phone today, like how we're looking to kind of, I wouldn't say like I change the concept of the Sundays, but I think there's so much opportunity to meet different coaches and hear from them. And, you know, we've got this platform and this community. So yeah, this guy, I've seen a lot of his videos posted. I mean, yeah, he'll speak for himself in a bit. Some of it like seems really, really interesting. Some of it, I was like, there's one where it's like Bluetooth headphones, for example, like we're both using them tonight. And I think from what I've seen on his videos, he would say, we shouldn't do that, like, and then he will explain why. And yeah, I'm interested, you know. So you see obviously a lot of stuff on the internet with different people giving different bits of advice. Some of it is going to be great, it's going to like optimize yourself, you know, your child, whatever. Maybe some of it, yeah, maybe it's not. I don't know. I think we just have to have an open mind. So
And that's what it'll be for the next few weeks, where we'll be inviting different guest coaches, and it's just another opinion. You might be sick of myself and Sean when Matt's been with us,
yeah.
but it's just about what can you take from all these different coaches that we bring on the platform.
Absolutely. Taylor, good to meet you.
Hey, likewise. How you guys doing?
Good afternoon, good evening, should I
Well,
say?
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
morning.
yeah.
It's morning for you, Taylor, no?
Yeah, California
Nice. And
in the morning.
were you watching any of the Premier League games today?
Yeah, yeah. And don't remind me of the Arsenal match.
Oh, yeah, Arsenal fan.
You're a gooner.
Yeah, a Gunner. Or yeah, a Gunner.
There we go.
Long
Good
time.
idea.
Back since like the Fabregas days.
Ah,
Ah,
proper supporter then, a proper gooner.
Somewhat, yeah.
There we go. So can we just have, so for the UK audience and maybe sort of people that aren't aware of your work, your journey, could you give us just a brief introduction
mm,
into you and the services you provide?
Yeah, sure. No problem. For everyone watching, I'm Taylor, the founder of Football Entangled, and basically my business, I help professional, amateur, semi-pro, academy, college footballers overcome injury, fix performance, take care of any kind of mental health issues, and bottom line, just become your best. And how I started it was basically off the back of my journey trying to play professional football in Europe. I'm 100% American, born and raised in California. It was my dream, as it is for most Americans that fall in love with football, was to play in Europe. I played a few seasons in Sweden and Greece. I had a fractured foot, refractured the same foot, ACL torn, meniscus torn, pelvis injuries, so many injuries to count. And basically, through all that years uh, of experience going through mainstream physical therapy and learning from dozens of different mentors across uh, physical training, rehab, recovery, sports science, kind of just going like A to Z. Okay, what actually is going to work? What's actually going to get me out on the pitch playing at the highest level? And I just see so many, issues and so many things going on right now across the football world. And Football Entangled basically is my mission to help guys avoid the same thing that I went through.
mm. And are there any players like, yeah, what sort of level of players do you work with? Like, what's the highest level?
The highest level would be in the Premier League and the Champions League.
Oh, fair enough.
Is there an
Okay.
age group that you mainly sort of get a bigger audience from?
Well, a bigger audience, I would say probably, because we're in football, it would tend to be younger players online, and those are more often or not the more common for me to get. Players that join my private community are players that are aspiring to be professional, or they are professional, but they're maybe playing League Two, League One, and they want to get to the Premier League. And then usually, like on a clientele basis, I'll work with guys in the Premier League that maybe have some injuries and they haven't really been able to get the right kind of help from their clubs.
Well, that was exactly what I was gonna just ask then, Taylor, because obviously, yeah, we haven't met each other before. In terms of like, what me and Danny do working in with like professional footballers. Like I'm a scout with Chelsea.
Okay, cool.
Dan works as with a lot of Premier League players himself. More on the pitch, I would say. Dan, would you say?
Yeah, it's more technical ball work.
Mm.
Awesome.
So like with let's say like some of those like top level Premier League, Champions League players that you've worked with, why would they need to go outside of their club to get help?
Yeah, that's often not kind of the first question, because you would think, right? The clubs are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into sports science, performance, S&C staff, and so like you would think they wouldn't have any issues, right? Well, the reality is players go through these cycles where they have like a ankle sprain and then a hamstring tear and then a MCL, and then unfortunately, like even as bad as the ACL, Achilles tear, and they go through this cycle where they're working with staff at the club, and they get told to do the same exact rehab program that they already did before, and it literally didn't work because they got injured again. And like probably the biggest example of that would be a player that I consulted with a few years ago at Middlesbrough, I believe, had like 3 or 4 groin tears, the same groin, the same surgery, and the same rehab program each time. So just from a general perspective, you would think, well, doing the same thing again and then expecting different results, that's kind of insanity, right?
And I totally
And
agree with. I can understand that from sort of being a one-on-one coach myself. I get asked the question all the time: why are they using you when they get the same staff and the same provision provided at their clubs? And it's players like their own individual program. When you're at a professional club, although there will be different injuries, it's the same kind of generic rehab program. And if it's
Mhm.
doing technical ball work, the forwards will more or less have the same generic finishing. 6 or 7 will stay after training. And the players that I work with and the other players that like their one-on-one coaches or their own S&C coaches or rehab trainers, the most elite players have them, one, because they can afford them, and two, they understand that to get that extra 1%, you need to be doing above and beyond what everyone else is doing. And what the clubs provide is amazing, but they have their staff for 25 to 40 players.
Mhm.
So when you have Taylor or other coaches, technical ball work, S&C, rehab, they want them specifically just for them. So it's a specific program catered to their needs rather than a generic, right, our right back has got an ACL injury, let's just give him an ACL rehab program.
Yeah.
Whereas it might be different because it's more position specific. So I totally understand sort of. So just a bit of clarification for some of the parents and coaches listening back to this that may think, well, why are they asking for your service? It's kind of, just to reiterate what you were saying.
Well, well, like it's that, and also they just want a different approach. They've been either stuck in the gym for 6 months, and they come back from let's say like a ACL tear, and they're on the pitch and they just don't feel the same, and maybe what they're feeling at that moment lines up with some of my messaging online on Instagram talking about, well, maybe there's a reason why you don't feel as fluid, as effortless, as um, free in your movement as you did before the surgery and before all the gym work, and how those things can affect basically how the body works under the skin when you actually have to perform at the highest level unconsciously, and you can't kind of bring over these cues that you're taught in the gym. And the biggest example of that would be these guys where they want you to learn to activate your glutes, right? It's like kind of one of the most common warm up exercises is when you have the players put the band around their ankles and their knee, and they do a bunch of like crab walks and different movements to force the glutes to activate. And so in the mainstream, they're saying, well, okay, that will make your glutes strong and that will make your glutes work on the pitch. But at the same time, all the guys doing that don't actually feel their glutes when they run unconsciously, because when you play football, you have to do something unconsciously. It can't be, okay, everyone pause for a second, let me turn my glutes on, you know?
Okay, so I mean, that's one of the things that I wanted to ask. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask, what are some of the main things that you do differently to the clubs?
Well, from a training perspective, I think it's good we focus there for the moment. From a training perspective, one of the things that you get caught up a lot in typical strength and conditioning is they want you to learn to brace your core, to basically keep the spine very stiff, because that's what has to happen to brace the load of a barbell over your back or a barbell on your waist. If you're doing like hip thrusts, or if you're trying to deadlift, you have to perform some kind of stiffening process in your core to not fall apart under the load of a barbell. And the funniest thing is we don't realize is when you're on the pitch and you're running, that is a unilateral movement where it's one foot, and your head's actually twisting, and your spine actually has some extension and flexion to allow you to actually move in a fluid manner. And that's the opposite of what is being taught to your nervous system when like you back squat or you deadlift or you do hip thrusts with the barbell. So that, like right there, that paradigm is totally opposite, where they're reinforcing the opposite patterns of movement into the nervous system in the gym that you need on the pitch. And so that's one
So, so,
example.
so do you have any children yourself, Taylor?
Do I know?
Okay, so like if you were to have your own children, because like this whole podcast is about like, can you make your child a footballer? You know, it's that kind of
Mm.
thought experiment, and then from the conversation, it then helps us give advice to parents. So
Yeah.
let's say that you're trying to raise your children to be professional footballers. Would you get them doing no gym work?
Well, if they're still children, definitely not. They should be playing lots of sports. They should be out enjoying themselves and learning kind of how their body actually works from the ground up. And one reason for that is like from the age of 0, like out of the womb up to the age of 2. That's like that period is actually when you make most of the, let's say, the genetic or kind of like the foundation of your athletic ability is from the womb, learning how to crawl, how to sit, and then eventually how to walk. Those are so foundational that that's a big part where if you can get the baby and then the toddler and then obviously like the young child and then into high school, lots of sports, kind of a very good variety of patterns of movement, that is really what I would say would lead towards a player at the age of 17, 18 being so-called talented and being a very good prospect to become a professional footballer.
Dan, do you have any thoughts so
Yeah,
far about that?
I I know that with certain academies in England, they start the gym work from under 15s.
Mm.
Yeah.
So from under 15s, they start gym work. I think from 16s, they will add weights. But I know the first year is body weight exercises. But then I know from in England the amount of children in academies from 10 years old that will do S&C training, and that will do strength and conditioning training. They'll post stuff on their social media accounts, and it's some of it may be just for the gram, for them to look that they're doing extra work, they're looking really good. Mum and dad might want them to see that, look, they're doing all this extra work, they're doing assisted pull-ups, but yeah, it's very hard to see from my point of view with the courses that I've been on and qualifications that I've had for me to understand why they're putting their child through that at that young age when their body is still growing. But it's so common in England. Literally from 10 years old, parents are on strength and conditioning programs. They're on running classes, speed courses, body weight. We've just had a half term. We've had an Easter break, and there were advertisements for body weighted strength and conditioning, speed, agility, and quickness courses throughout the week. And this is from 6 years old to 50 to up until year 11, so 6 to 15 years old. And they sell it. It sells well. The content they create is amazing, but it's hard to be the bearer of bad news because it looks very good on social media and everyone's doing it.
We did a episode where we interviewed one of the strength and conditioning coaches at Chelsea, and he told me that they'll teach the form of squatting, deadlifting, lots of Olympic lifting from under 9s when the players join the academy, and then they'll gradually add load. And so they are developing strength with the players that way. I currently, in my current beliefs, and I have an open mind, like, this is why, it's a continual journey of discovery. I don't say that forever I'm going to have a fixed view. But at the moment, my opinion is, I think that is the right way to do it. I haven't.
And sorry, just to interrupt you, just for context for some of the listeners and people that will listen back to this on Spotify that may not understand, Chelsea are probably one of the top 2 academies in England, in the world. So if they, and this is where I may not agree with that, but if they are doing that, then every other academy is going to be replicating, every other coach is, because you want your child to be at a category 1, you want them to be at the best. So if, regardless of what my beliefs are, so just for context with what Sean is, the reason why all these courses and coaches are doing this, providing this service, is because this is
I mean, they believe in it. This is the clubs do have strength and conditioning teams, and I guess that it's been part of academies in England, in Europe, across many professional academies. This is a part of their program and syllabus, and it's what they believe develops footballers to be the best they can be and the best for their club. I currently do believe that would be the right thing to do. If I had a kid, I would be encouraging them, if they weren't in an academy and I still wanted them to be a footballer, I would be going and seeking out strength conditioning programs, which would include squatting, and as they get older, adding load. But Taylor, can you convince me otherwise? Can you convince me that I've got the wrong beliefs?
Well, I don't need to convince you. I think the proof's in the pudding, because while Chelsea do invest a lot of money into their academy, they spend a lot more money when they buy a kid from Ecuador or from Brazil or from Argentina who's 18, and they spend 10, 20 million on this player who's going to take a spot from the academy players that are from London.
I wouldn't say, but hang on. I wouldn't go into that argument necessarily. Like, let's say Enzo Fernandez, it's not because, or I don't know whether he has or hasn't had any sort of strength conditioning program to help him be the player that he is. But I mean, there's not that many. The core of the Chelsea group, as an example, is very much like English based. So I don't know, like right now, I mean, it seems to be working quite well. England are definitely one of the top nations in the world for developing footballers. If you think about like Foden, Bellingham, Musiala had an English development. 3 of the top players in the world have come from England. So and they would have had strength conditioning programs. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you look at the numbers in terms of teams like Chelsea, obviously Real Madrid. I mean, Real Madrid the last 2 summers have spent 80 million on a skinny Brazilian kid because they think he can become one of the best in the world. And Vinicius Rodrigo, and now Endrick. I mean, all three of those guys are born and raised on the streets playing barefoot street football. And that is like that's the talent that got them into an academy in Brazil, and then that's the talent that took them to play in the first team in Brazil, and then that's the talent that took them to get scouted and obviously bought for a lot of money by a big club in Europe. And the one thing I want to kind of help you understand is like someone like Phil Foden, Musiala. If you just look at their body structure, they're not a muscular, build. It's a very stringy build, and the muscles are not short and contracted, which is the result of bodybuilding and kind of typical gym work. Because
I was sorry to but yeah, no, and I agree. I agree. If there was some sort of like bodybuilding program, that sounds like that would be the wrong program. But the top strength and conditioning coaches at the academies are tailoring their strength work to help the players become footballers. So then the outcome is, still those bodies like Bellingham, Foden, Musiala.
I understand that, but they're still doing bodybuilding. All of the gym work that even a sports specific S&C coach is going to talk to you about, they're basically going to dress it up with fancy words. But all of the, let's say, modern science on weightlifting comes from bodybuilding in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, where hypertrophy was the main target. And so while you can kind of say, okay, I'm going to decrease the weight, I'm going to do full body weightlifting, they're going to lift the weights fast, or even some coaches have athletes do basically like weighted plyometrics, where you kind of deadlift and you lift the weights as you jump. There's 1,000 variations of these things, but the end result is, are those players like Bellingham and Foden and Musiala, are they at that level because of that stuff, or are they at that level despite of that stuff? And my argument would be that they're at that level despite that kind of training, because as I'm sure you're aware, that training is available to thousands and thousands of players across the world. And then, but there's only a few players that make it to the highest level.
I'm going to jump in because I'm going to be the referee tonight because we're on a timer and we've got so many questions coming in. So for people that I've been looking at some of these questions, there is a question box. So if you're with us live now, please submit your questions. This is going to be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So just search Project Footballer and you'll be able to listen back live to this.
And YouTube. We're up to 7,000 subscribers now.
One of the questions, so the next question, somebody noticed on the live that we're both wearing Bluetooth headphones. So for some context, I wouldn't have understood that if I didn't have a conversation with Sean. What is the issue, and why has somebody, that's one of your followers, saying, what is the issue with us wearing AirPods or Bluetooth headphones?
Well, this would fall under the category of what is basically termed the mitochondrial function. The mitochondria is the organelle in the human cell that creates ATP, that creates energy, and that energy is what allows your body and all your cells in your body to basically carry out every process that you need to do to live and grow and basically live across the board. And so the radiation that's given off from wireless devices like AirPods and cell phones and Wi-Fi devices, cell towers, TV screens, video game consoles, all of those devices have been shown to have very, very bad effects on energy production, on mental health, on hormone secretion, on cortisol spikes, and this across the board, it just lowers your body's ability to function as optimal as possible.
So my question is, sorry, Sean, I like what you've said and I'm learning from it. But how comes 80% of footballers, when you see them coming off the coach, coming off the team bus, going into games, will have Beats, AirPods, will have Bluetooth speak? Why is this not more known within the professional game?
Well, like the one caveat is obviously some of the players are
Promotion.
sponsored by the products for sure. But second of all, like you were saying before, it's just good for players like the style. It's the marketing, it's the branding of Apple products. That's their whole, you know, way they appeal to the to the to the to the to the younger generation to buy their products. And so the marketing is a big part of it. And thirdly, it's because it's something where you don't just put it in your ear and then it hurts. You know, it's like death by a thousand cuts, where it's like you do it long enough and then you start to feel the effects, but it's not a direct causation. And I basically think it's not really a coincidence that nowadays we have more and more and more mental health issues as we have more and more and more exposure to things like AirPods and cell phones in our hand, which if you go into the Apple manual, it says don't put the phone on your skin because it's bad for you. That's
What?
one of the funniest things out there.
So Taylor, you know, like I've got this like approach of, you know, like so many people just always wanting to learn and always wanting to find optimizations. And like, you know, I found your page, and one of the things that came up was your recommendation of, yeah, no Bluetooth headphones. And then I'm like, okay, I've not seen that before, because like initially, like when I don't know, years and years ago, started to be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna start wearing Bluetooth headphones. Then I was like, yeah, I'll do some research on it first. The research that I could see seemed to say that like Bluetooth I mean, there's radio waves everywhere.
Yeah.
And so the radio waves that come off Bluetooth are so tiny, like it can't get through the skin. And like Elon Musk, I remember like when he was asked about it, and he kind of like laughed about it, and he said, look, I could tape like 50 phones all around my head, and even like, you know, around my testicles and that kind of thing, and he said I'll be absolutely fine, like there's no problem. And he's one of the top science. I mean, he works as you know, in for SpaceX, and yeah, he's involved with, you know, the best scientists in the world. So that gave me a lot of comfort.
1
And
minute
then,
warning on this topic, by the way. 1 minute warning.
yeah, well, I went on to like look at some research on this and look at some papers. There didn't seem to be like hard evidence to say that Bluetooth, like, you know, has these type of effects that you're talking about. I mean, can you is there any sources, any like scientists that you can recommend to us, or any papers?
Yeah, sure. Well, the best place for like to start on this topic specifically would be a great book by John Ott, Health and Light. That's a book from the 70s. He was a famous what's the word? He was the guy that kind of invented taking video of plants and flowers and then having it fast forwarded over many months, and then using those videos in like Disney movies. And that, that's a great book. Then there's one called Going Somewhere by Dr. Andrew Marino, which goes into the politics and the lawsuits and all of the legal uh, battles
Yeah.
surrounding the topic.
When
And
was
then,
because the 1970 book probably isn't as relevant, whereas like,
oh, I would say that one's very relevant. I think for any athlete, just to understand about how health or how light affects health. That is a great place to start.
okay. Well, when was the other book written? Going Somewhere?
Uh, I'd have to check, but I think in the 90s or the 2000s.
Okay.
I'm just going to interrupt the podcast for 30 seconds to tell you about We Make Footballers. We Make Footballers are the largest football coaching provider to children aged 4 to 12 in the UK, operating across 200 facilities. We focus on developing the individual, working on the technical and physical components of the game, and it's had amazing results, with hundreds of our ex-players joining professional academies and 4 of our ex-players currently playing in the Premier League. Our program is built around small-sided play using indoor and outdoor facilities. Visit our website, wemakefootballers.com, to see if we have a training facility in your area.
Sean, if you could check the question box, because I'm just reading some of these comments. People may have submitted some questions. So my next question, what advice? So my son is 12 years old. He's an under 12, plays for a Category 2 academy in England. What advice would you have to me or to a parent that wants to get their son into an academy, or that is at an academy, that the most basic advice for how I can help develop my child?
Yeah, I'd say
For
the
free,
most basic.
for free, without
Yeah, of
paying
course.
for a one-on-one coach.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's the biggest place to start. Is a lot of parents do not need to pay for a one-on-one trainer to do, ball drills. I think if anything, they should pay for their daughter or son to join a league where they play indoor football, they play futsal, they play some kind of small-sided game. That is the biggest cheat code for football development. On top of that, it can be great to obviously, like I mentioned before, cross training with other sports. That's all for free. Playing basketball, ping pong, tennis, track and field. The more they expose themselves to different types of movement, the more athletic they will be, and the more adaptable they'll be to handling kind of the challenges that comes with playing at a higher level in football.
Go on, Sean.
I don't mean to argue so much. I'm so sorry. But you know how there's a lot of criticism for American footballers, because the sort of criticism that comes is that the American player is often very athletic, but not as high football IQ, or not as technical on the ball. Is that not part of that problem, that's the training program?
I would say that the USA makes, in a lot of the sports, some of the best athletes in the world.
Yeah, agree.
So I would say, us, being American, being behind in football is just the matter of the culture. Football is not really the first sport here, and obviously that's changing, over the last 5-10 years, and I think in the next 5-10 years, we're seeing a lot more talented athletes, talented footballers come out of America and playing in the Premier League, the Bundesliga, Serie A. So we are great athletes, but I think turning athletes into footballers, that's getting something better in America for sure. But that's more of a cultural issue, I'd say.
Okay, so your advice, though, even because my sort of thinking on it is that I agree. If you're a mum or dad who's played a good level of football, then yeah, in theory, you shouldn't really need to send your kid out to a technical coach. You could do the practice yourself pretty much, and the games programs. But for a lot of parents, they love football, but they weren't good at it themselves. So then I kind of say, well, sure, yeah, go and find a great one-to-one coach out there. And it can really develop players and build their confidence. And it's players. I think players do need an individual program as well as a team program. But you're against that.
Are you saying an individual program for football training, or are you saying it for physical exercise to become more athletic?
Depending on how advanced the player wants to get, I think just to start with, just the individual technical coach. If they want to up it and they want to take it a bit more serious. For football. Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's because the parent can't do the individual practice that the player needs themselves. So they are literally paying for a coach to do the reps and pass back and forth with the child, and hopefully they do it in a really fun way. But those individual technical hours that are required to be a footballer, yeah, that's going in. I mean, yeah, it'd be lovely. It'd be so nice if we could replicate the environment that maybe is in what's in Brazil, where kids playing in the street and practicing against the wall. And but for a lot of very urban areas, it's not necessarily realistic. So the parent does have to go and seek out a controlled individual technical coach for their child.
Taylor, sorry, my question to you. So,
Yeah.
parent one wants their. Let me start again. There's two children. Both players and parents want them to make it as professional football players. However, parent one concentrates solely on football. They train 3-4 times a week with their academy football team. The spare day or two that they have off, they've got a one-on-one coach, or they do strength and conditioning training solely focused on football. Parent two takes your advice. They do their 3 or 4 times a week with their academy, and the other 2 days they're doing a separate sport. Who's got it right? Who's got it wrong? What's the right way in your opinion with the research that you've had?
In my experience growing up in California and seeing lots of rich Caucasian parents having personal coaches for their players, and then also seeing a lot of really talented Hispanic players coming out of more impoverished areas without access to personal trainers and just playing small-sided, playing Sunday league, playing futsal, playing indoor. These players are way better across the board. Of course, there are certain exceptions, but I think the more you play small-sided games, the better you'll be. And if 80% of the time you're cross-training, you're doing some barefoot ball work on your own in the backyard against the wall, you're just enjoying the ball. Like if your son or daughter isn't on their own, just from their own passion, going to the backyard, hitting the ball off the wall back and forth and juggling, like that's the passion that takes them to the Premier League or to a high level. If you have to force it on them by like hiring a coach, I would question, like, does the child actually want it, and do they, like, on their own intuitively like that sport?
That is a bold statement, and that's something I definitely agree with. And I've said this to parents in the past. If your son or daughter doesn't want to do extra training, doesn't want to do a one-on-one coach, they don't want to become a footballer, don't force them into it, because they will end up hating it.
Yeah, for sure.
I got a question that came from the question box, and the question is, can people do fascia training in the gym? I can't read my own handwriting. And gym training. That's what I said. But before you answer that, what is fascia training? What is that?
Yeah, good question. So fascia, Fascia, is a system of the body that basically is like a spider web of sorts, a soft sponge-like matrix that connects and wraps around, interlaces around muscle fibers, bones, tendons, organs, nerves, and it's kind of like a big spider web that connects your body into one system. And there are ways to train it directly, and that is largely what my training system is focused, because I believe that is the cornerstone of being athletic and being functional and being strong. All these things are about how well the body is going to be integrated, as opposed to thinking, okay, how big are the muscles, or how strong is this one single muscle group. I want to make your body more integrated and basically more holistic, so that when you're playing, it's everything's in tune. And in my experience, that's the highest players, they're better at that. Their bodies are more integrated. Their nervous system actually understands and has full control of all their limbs. And generally, in my experience, the more gym work you're doing, it takes away from the fascia, because gym work, when you're lifting weights, it's more efficient from a thermodynamic point of view. It's more efficient to prioritize muscles when you are lifting weights because that helps to lift weights. But but in my experience, it doesn't help as much when you want to run fast on the football pitch.
Okay. So then to the person's question, can you
Yeah.
do fascia training and gym training?
Yeah, you know, in the past, this question I've usually answered it by saying that they're like polar opposites of each other. They're basically in a car, if you have the gas and the brakes, it's like doing both of those would be like hitting the gas and the brakes at the same time.
Okay.
And nowadays, my answer is somewhat the same, but the reality is if any of you guys on this live stream watching are actual footballers, I'm sure that your team or your club's going to make you do some kind of gym work. So all the athletes that I work with, our objective is to do the right training to make you as great as possible, but also help you overcome any kind of stuff that you maybe have to do with your team.
And how do you develop fascia training? Like how do you get better fascia?
Yeah, so the way that you train fascia is you look at your connections to the outside world. And that's just a fancy way of saying your feet, your hands, and your tongue. Your feet obviously are the way that you stand on the ground. The bottom of your feet on the arches have thousands of receptors that your brain uses to absorb information from the bottom of your ground because it's the only thing on the ground. So your body has to use something to understand, okay, if I'm standing on a rock or sand or grass or on a mountain, I have to, you know, activate certain muscles in a certain pattern to make sure I don't fall over. And so that can be taken to the nth degree for football. And so basically, if you train your feet, your hands, and your tongue correctly, you can change how the fascia is woven inside the body from those three different points. And then again, the feet are because you're standing on your feet, obviously. Your hands, because your hands are used to fight, to hold weapons, to punch, to grab onto things. So obviously, there's also things here that your nervous system uses to feel your environment. And your tongue is because it's how you talk, you breathe, how you kiss, how you eat, all those things.
Dan, before you move on to another question, because I can see like you've got like loads more, can I just quickly ask? So all right, so how do you develop that with the feet, the hands, and the tongue? Like, what training methods do you use?
Yeah, so basically everything we do more or less is unweighted, and we use certain things like a tennis ball, a plyo ball, towels to basically help those different parts of your body to get stimulated. For example, in the feet, most people have lost their ability to retract their toes correctly. And so basically what we do is we help regain the functionality of the toes, the ball of the feet, the arch, the ankle, because that leads into when you run, you want to be able to land on the ball of the foot, and the ankle needs to be able to hold and create some level of tension so that the ankle doesn't collapse and your heel doesn't smash the ground every time you land when you run. So that ability of your foot ankle complex, the whole tension, and to land correctly is a very pivotal part of what I do. And then basically once the ankle can do that and the toes can retract correctly, and you can kind of have this apparatus available to you once again. And I say once again because when you're born, babies actually have this functionality all built in. And during childhood, we're supposed to kind of naturally foster this. But because of modern shoes and modern lifestyle and not as much cross training barefoot, we're losing this a lot. And that's why we have so many injuries in younger and younger kids nowadays. And so once you can get the feet back working correctly, then you can develop basically what is fascial connections up the posterior up the back of the legs, basically the posterior of the chain.
Okay.
Calves, hamstring, glutes, abdomen, And then basically the same kind of things go from the hands up to the upper back, and everything meets in the midline, which is the core basically. And the midline, just to cover that for a moment, the midline is kind of this connection from your mouth to your anus, and that's actually when you were embryo in your mother's stomach. That's what first developed. The embryo, or the mouth and the anus, were on both sides of the embryo, and then as you grew into, you know, into the fetus, those expanded out, and so this connection is really important to develop as well.
Interesting. Oh, that's fascinating.
I think we've only got about 13 minutes, so I want to get through as many questions as possible. First one, very quickly, ice baths. Thoughts on ice baths?
It depends. I think if you're in Dubai and it's super hot, it's super sunny, and there's like big ice bath out in the sun, I love that. I think if you're in Scotland and in the winter, it's already cold enough outside. You don't need to be doing a cold bath. But there's a big caveat there. I think if you can get into a river, into a lake, into an ocean that obviously is clean, that's fantastic, because there are other benefits to cold exposure than the cold itself. When you're grounded in a natural environment where the ground obviously is natural with sand, dirt, or grass, you are getting exposed to what's called the Schumann resonance, which is a way that your body can lower stress naturally and absorb electrons from the earth. And so it's totally for free. It's very easy to do, and I think it's amazing. But the thing is, it's just tough when like ice baths and cold baths get taken from the natural hop in the ocean versus like an ice bath in my basement. You know, it's very different because there's multiple layers of why the ocean's beneficial, and then if you take one factor from that, which is the cold, then you lose all the other things that kind of offset maybe if you're doing too much cold and you're adding too much stress to your bucket.
But isn't it more to do with recreating that feeling in the body that we're under stress, and then it then starts getting the liver to then start. I don't know the science behind it, but I kind of like watching that video that was like talking about getting that what is it, the fight or flight feeling in the body, and then that then is then so good for you, and then it strengthens. Yeah, I don't know. It does some. That's what you're trying to do, isn't it? No.
Well, in my opinion, that's not really what you want to do, right? Because you're like in that paradigm, you're just aging faster, because your body's making more cortisol, more hormones because of the stress to help you deal with the stress, so you avoid the stress in the future. You know.
Interesting.
And kind of like you are shortcutting that process, yes, but you only have so much stress in your life that you can handle. And if you're already playing football, training, doing all this stuff, and then you hop in a cold bath, well, there's a point where you're doing too much, and that's when you get issues with the thyroid, and you get people just kind of getting burnt out.
And again, this platform, for some of the new listeners and our regular, this is all about opinions. So everything that we are saying, it's down to you what you want to take. We are just giving our opinion. We've got guests that will give their opinion. It's down for you as the parent, the player, or the coach to take what you can from it. With regard to that, reading some of these comments, and Sean, please keep checking your question box, is although I understand Taylor's point of view, someone else's issue is going to be every single professional football player, the day after a game, their recovery session includes an ice bath, a plunge pool. So that is going to be sort of some of the arguments where people are going to disagree with you.
I have heard someone else say that it causes aging. Like Taylor's not the first person I've heard say that. So that was interesting
And
to hear that response.
this is
And
where you have to
I'll look into it
understand.
more now.
This is where you have to understand football is a business. The football club is not interested in a player aging. They're interested in injury prevention. So every professional football player taking an ice bath, the club are doing that as precaution. They don't want their players they want to get rid of lactic acid. They want no prevention of injury. The aging process, their contract will be up by then. So this is where you have to understand,
Right.
as a player, a parent, or a coach, are you injury prevention? There are other ways that you can recover after a game, but the cold plunge, the ice bath, what are the other downsides of it?
Someone in the comments is asking about sunscreen and sunlight, and that's like, I have super fair skin. Like if I go to a hot country, I've got to cover myself in factor 50. But I think I've seen some of your videos. Are you against sunscreen?
Well, to answer your first comment, like my family, like heritage is from Scotland. So like my family is very, very, like my skin now is darker because of so many hours building up what I would call your solar callus. And that basically is your ability to assimilate light into the cell. Not everyone is equal in their ability to basically be in the sun and that sunlight to not burn them. Like I can be in the sunlight all day long, don't get burnt at all, because I built that up, because I built that ability up over many months with the proper lifestyle. And so with sunscreen, the funny thing is there's a lot of ingredients in the sunscreen that have been proven to cause cancer and other really serious issues. And those kind of things.
Because I've looked into that. There's a certain chemical in some of the sunscreens that has been linked to that, but there's some that don't have it. You need to be careful with your sunscreen. That it's some chemical that begins with B.
Yeah, that's right. I think largely there's a deeper issue why you're getting sunburned. Know what I mean? And then just rubbing on a chemical goo from a factory that you have no idea how it's made is not the long-term answer.
Okay. But what about in Australia, where 2 in 3 people get skin cancer?
Would you say that's from the sunlight?
I mean, I guess so. Like, don't they advise people to keep out of, like, the harmful, poisonous UV rays?
Well, I can say on the equator, where the UV rays are at the highest, there's not a spike of skin cancer. And that definitely increasing vitamin D is one of the best things to reduce your likelihood of any kind of health issues in your life.
Interesting. I guess for some people, like, just jumping in now, they'll be like, why are they talking about sunscreen and it's a football podcast? But I mean, it's all because part of what you're saying of the advice you give to the footballers is this holistic approach of how they live their life. And so I guess that part of it is, in the morning, going and getting sunlight first thing. And then, this is part of what you advise, no?
Well, yeah, exactly. Because, for example, it's one of the biggest issues I see with players in England that are darker skinned because they have ancestry in Africa. Because of their skin type and because of their haplotype, they need so much sunlight to produce enough vitamin D to be healthy. And so because they're in England where there's not that much sunlight, or at least compared to somewhere in Africa, they need to eat a lot of seafood and get as much, light as they can in England. And that's one of the issues I see, where clubs telling players to take pills for vitamin D, that does not work. Those pills are made from the waste of industrial factories, and sometimes even kind of like copied from vegetable oils and seed oils. And so sunlight is the first thing that any athlete should be looking at to fix.
Okay. Dan, had you got a
Yes,
last couple of questions?
last couple. Sean, you need to check the question box. I can't see the question box, but there's quite a few comments saying about they've put questions in the question box.
Oh,
So we've only got
okay.
4 minutes left. So what advice would you give to a player or parent that isn't at an elite level? So I know you spoke about they don't need a one-on-one coach. I know you've given us plenty of advice, and a lot of the advice you have given us, some of it is for more elite players and players that are trying to play at a higher level. If we're looking at someone at a grassroots level, what advice would you give in terms of forgetting the practical side of things, the one-on-one skills coach? You spoke about sunscreen, you spoke about ice baths, screen time on a tablet's kind of just what advice would you be able to give to parents and players and coaches that aren't at the elite level?
Well, the funniest thing is my answer is so simple. And the reason I say is because working with a lot of top level players, even they can't do the basics, which for me is going to bed at 10 p.m. every night. It's funny. It's so simple, but yet I ask players in the Premier League that are getting paid thousands of lots of money a week, and they can't do that. So if you're interested in just being your best, even if you're at the grassroots level and you want to be your healthiest, your most athletic, at least get really good recovery and go to bed on time. Because going to bed at midnight and then waking up at 8 a.m. is very different from going to bed at 10 p.m. and waking up at 6. If you miss those 2 hours, you miss a window to create a certain hormones that you won't get back by like doing extra sleep in the morning. And then when you do that, then you miss the very important parts of the morning sunlight that trigger the production of more hormones in the morning, right? So our bodies were designed to work in cycles, and so the more that you mess with those cycles, the worse your ability will be to be healthy.
It's hard to hear this.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear. I know you. I know you're speaking the truth, but yeah, it's still tough.
And this
Yeah,
is what I
and
would say. Sorry,
it's
Taylor.
tough.
Reading some of these comments, and this is an amazing episode. I know there's some parents and coaches and players watching this that might not agree with everything that you're saying, that what we're saying. And the same thing that we repeat every week. Project Footballer is the voice for youth football. And you might not agree with 99% of the things that we say, but if there is that one thing that you can take, that's what this is for. We're trying to educate parents, coaches, and players. And it could just be the tiniest thing. One of the podcasts that Sean Dunn spoke about the different types of toothpaste that you should take or your child should take. Spoke about screen time before bed. You've spoke about what time they should go bed and the reason for it. So someone's thinking about, I can get them extra 2 hours in the morning. You've explained why 10 till 6 p.m. to a.m. is better than 12 till 8. So just to bear in mind, these listeners, some of these comments that aren't happy with some of your reasons, some of our reasons, just take one thing from it. That's what this platform is about.
And you know what's fun? It's like we're all, talking about, oh yeah, how can we make our kids footballers and how can we optimize their training program? But as you have this desire for this learning, you pick up things that you can improve for yourself. Like, I know it's the right thing to do to go sleep 10 o'clock. And, I should be applying it to myself to be, better at what I do. But then, it's like I said, it's very hard. It's very tough to do. But yeah, as well, if you are going to be a parent of a kid who's going to be a footballer, I think you have to set those examples so that your kid can follow. So, yeah, anyway, there was someone who cussed me out and said, Sean, are you even going in the question box? I did, there's been just so many, and we have covered quite a few questions. I'm going to answer his question. So he's left 2. I'm going to pick this one because it looks like a quick one. Do you know Bill Paris? Have you collaborated with him?
No,
There we
I don't know who that
go.
is.
That's a
There
quick
we
one.
go.
And you've answered it. So very quickly, Taylor, before we finish, where can people find you? Yeah, it's been great to have you on here.
Definitely.
What's your handle? What is your title? What's your role?
You know,
What's your job?
I don't know. You know, I'm a football specialist, injury rehab specialist, performance coach. You know, I'm just here to help footballers do their best. And whether they have to fix injury or strength and speed or their mental thing, usually it's all of it combined into one. Guys come to me to fix their injuries, but in reality, I see their head needs some more help as well. So, and again, thank you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it.
What's your
Happy to
social
talk.
media handle for
Yeah,
those
yeah,
listening back to this on YouTube or on Spotify or other podcasts?
yeah. So find me at Football Entangled on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and the website is entangledtribe.com.
And sorry, your soccer vault. Sorry, I said it wrong because I've got not the best eyes. Bill Parsi. Do you know Bill Parsi?
Are you trying to say Bill Parisi?
Oh, maybe.
They've put Parsi, so
Yeah,
it
they
might be
put
Parisi.
Parsi.
If you
Yeah,
know Parisi,
It might be like an American coach. I'm not sure.
Oh,
but
Not
no,
sure.
you
right, that's
don't
cool.
know him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just wanted to show that support to this person because he comes on the channel every week. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, okay, cool, awesome.
Cool.
So just to finish on this, you have Sean Conlon at Sean Conlon, the CEO, the founder, Project Footballer, We Make Footballers. I'm Dan Edwards, one-on-one coach. We are here every Sunday, UK time, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. This is available on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. Catch us on Instagram. Taylor, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Taylor. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to be in LA
Yeah.
for 5 weeks in July, training some of the players after the Euros. So I'm going to hit you up.
All right, let's
There
do
we
it,
go.
mate.
Cool.
Thank you,
Nice
guys.
one. See you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, yeah.